Hi, I'm Sarah. I've always loved stories, but growing up, I didn't think much about learning new languages. Life felt simple. I grew up in a small town with familiar faces all around me. Most people around spoke English, but sometimes I felt a little lost when I couldn't speak as well as others. My best friend, Emma, she was different. She spoke English so fluently, her words flowed like water. I remember one time we were sitting at a cafe, and she ordered so confidently while I stumbled over my words. It was embarrassing. I wanted to cry right there. But instead, I smiled, hoping nobody noticed. Emma noticed though. She gave me a soft smile and said, it's okay. It's just practice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how I wanted to be like Emma, confident and free. I wanted to speak English fluently, so I started thinking about what to do. The first step I took was to listen. I used to sit in my room late at night and watch English movies with subtitles. I laughed at the funny parts, cried during the sad ones, and slowly, the words started to make sense. I would repeat sentences after the actors, mimicking their tone and style. There's something about hearing how people speak that makes a big difference. I remember one movie, The Pursuit of Happiness. There was a scene where the main character, Chris, was struggling so much to make ends meet. He was talking to his son, trying to stay strong, but you could hear the pain in his voice. I started to cry, not just because of his situation, but because I understood every word. I felt his pain through his words. And that was the first time I realized how powerful English could be. One day, I met a girl named Jenny at a bookstore. She was struggling to pick out an English book for her class. I smiled at her and said, "That one's really good. It's easy to understand and has a lot of dialogues." Jenny was so happy to hear someone help her. We started talking, and to my surprise, our conversation flowed smoothly. I wasn't scared anymore. I realized that when you speak from the heart, the fear fades away. So, here's my first tip: listen more than you speak. Whether it's music, movies, or conversations around you, pay attention to the way people talk. It's not just about grammar, it's about feeling the rhythm of the language. One time I was at a party, feeling out of place because everyone was speaking so fast. I didn't know how to jump in, so I just stood in the corner. Tears started to fill my eyes because I felt so different, so left out. But then I remembered a small trick someone once told me: smile, even if you don't know what to say. So I smiled, and soon someone approached me and started a conversation. All I had to do was listen and nod, and before I knew it, I was part of the group. Smile and be open to conversations. People appreciate a listener as much as a speaker. I kept pushing myself, even when it felt hard. There were days I wanted to give up, especially when I made mistakes. I once said sheeps instead of sheep in class, and everyone laughed. I went home crying, thinking I'd never get better. But my mom said something that stuck with me: mistakes are proof that you're trying, so don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's part of the learning process. Another trick I learned was to talk to yourself in English. It might sound funny, but it really helps. I would stand in front of the mirror and pretend I was giving a speech or having a conversation with someone. It was awkward at first, but slowly I started to feel more comfortable hearing myself speak in English. There was a time when I had to present a project in front of my class. I was so nervous, my hands were shaking. I practiced every night for a week, standing in front of my mirror, speaking to my reflection. When the day came, I was still scared, but as I started speaking, I realized something. I knew what I was saying. The words were mine, and I believed in them. By the end of the presentation, I felt proud of myself. Practice out loud. The more you hear your own voice, the less scary it becomes. One of the most important things I learned was the power of reading aloud. I picked up books, magazines, anything I could find, and read out loud to myself. It wasn't just about understanding the words, it was about feeling the language on my tongue. I found that when I read aloud, I remembered more and felt more confident. Emma gave me another great tip one day when we were talking about how hard it is to find time to practice. She said, "Why don't you just talk to me in English all the time?" We can help each other, so we made a pact. Whenever we met, we would only speak in English. At first, it was awkward, but soon it became natural. Having a friend to practice with made everything easier. Find a practice buddy. It doesn't have to be formal, just have fun with it. Sometimes I felt overwhelmed, like I'd never be able to speak fluently. But then I remembered how far I'd come. I wasn't perfect, but I was better than I was yesterday. Be patient with yourself. Progress takes time, but it's happening even when you don't see it. Learning English opened so many doors for me. I remember when I got my first job interview. I was so nervous, but I knew that speaking English confidently would help me get through it. I practiced answering questions in front of the mirror, using all the tips I had learned. And you know what? I got the job. English isn't just a language, it's a key to new opportunities. Another thing that helped me a lot was immersing myself in English. I changed the language settings on my phone and computer to English. I started following English-speaking influencers and watching English YouTubers. It was like surrounding myself with the language, even when I wasn't studying. One day, I was scrolling through social media and I came across a motivational speech. The speaker said, "You are what you repeatedly do." That hit me hard. I realized that if I wanted to get better at English, I had to make it part of my daily life. So every day, even if it was just for a few minutes, I practiced. I listened to a podcast or read an article. Make English part of your daily routine. As time went on, I started to feel more confident. I wasn't just learning English, I was becoming part of a bigger world. I could connect with more people, understand more cultures, and express myself in new ways. English helped me grow, not just as a speaker, but as a person. There were still hard days, though. I remember when I had to talk to someone on the phone for the first time in English. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I would mess up every word. But I took a deep breath, reminded myself of everything I had learned, and went for it. Face your fears head on. The more you do something, the less scary it becomes. I want you to know that it's okay to feel frustrated. There will be days when you feel like you're not making any progress. But every word you learn, every sentence you speak, brings you closer to your goal. Celebrate the small victories. Maybe today, you learned a new word or had a short conversation. That's something to be proud of. The journey to learning English isn't just about speaking perfectly. It's about connecting with others, expressing yourself, and opening doors to new opportunities. So keep going. Even when it's tough, you're stronger than you think, and your voice matters. One day, I met a girl named Lisa at the library. She was from California, but she struggled with speaking English too. We sat at the same table, and she noticed I was reading a book aloud, whispering the words under my breath. She smiled and said, "I do that too. It's the only way I can understand the words better." We instantly clicked. It felt good to meet someone who understood my struggle. We began talking more, sharing tips and learning together. I remember one day, after practicing speaking for an hour, Lisa said something that really stuck with me. "You know, Sarah, the more mistakes I make, the more I learned." She wasn't afraid to mess up, and that gave me courage. So here's another tip. Don't be shy to speak, even if you make mistakes. Every time you say something wrong, you learn how to say it right. Lisa and I decided to challenge ourselves. We made a pact that every day we'd each learn 5 new words and use them in conversation. I'd come up with words like amazing or enthusiastic, while Lisa would pick words like remarkable or determined. It became a fun game. And soon, those words started feeling natural. That's my next tip. Learn a few new words every day and try to use them in real-life conversations. It's not about memorizing words, it's about using them. There was a funny moment when we both tried to use the word phenomenal in a conversation. We were at a coffee shop, and I said, "This coffee is phenomenal," while Lisa blurted out, "The weather is phenomenal today." We both burst out laughing. It was awkward, but also it was fun. Learning together made everything easier. Find a learning partner who can share the journey with you. As we continued our practice, I noticed something else. When Lisa spoke, she always sounded so clear. I realized it wasn't just about what she was saying, it was how she said it. That's when I started paying attention to pronunciation. I'd listen to how native speakers pronounced certain words, and I'd try to copy them. One trick that helped was breaking words into smaller parts and saying them slowly. For example, interesting became interesting. Slowly but surely, I started sounding more natural. So, here's another tip: focus on pronunciation. Speak slowly and break words down if you need to. Clarity is more important than speed. One cold winter morning, I was walking through the park, listening to a podcast. It was about personal growth and success. The speaker talked about how important it is to challenge yourself daily. I paused and thought, why don't I challenge myself to speak more in English? So I made a decision. Every day, I would talk to at least one person in English, even if it was just saying hello or asking for directions. It was hard at first, but after a few weeks, I found myself having full conversations with strangers. My confidence grew, and that's when I realized the more you speak, the easier it gets. Even if it's just a few words a day, make it a habit. One of the most emotional moments on my journey was when I had to speak at my cousin's wedding. My whole family was there, and I had written a short speech to congratulate her. I was so nervous, I thought I'd pass out. I stood in front of everyone, my hands shaking and my voice barely a whisper. But then I looked over at Emma, who gave me a reassuring nod. I took a deep breath and started speaking. The words came out slowly but clearly. By the end, everyone was clapping and I couldn't believe it. I had done it. That day, I learned a valuable lesson: nervousness is natural, but don't let it stop you from speaking. Take a deep breath and just go for it. Another tip that really helped me was thinking in English. It sounds tricky, but it works. Whenever I was walking, shopping, or even just lying in bed, I try to think in English instead of my native language. If I saw a dog, I'd think, that's a cute dog, instead of translating it from my first language. This helped my brain get used to forming sentences in English without thinking too much. Try it. Next time you're doing something simple, describe what you're doing in English, even if it's in your head. One of the hardest moments for me was when I tried to give directions to someone in English. I knew where the place was, but I didn't know how to explain it properly. I fumbled with my words, and the person looked confused. I felt embarrassed and frustrated, but after they left, I realized I needed to work on giving directions and describing things in English. So, I practiced simple sentences like, go straight and turn left, or the supermarket is next to the bank. The next time someone asked me for directions, I was ready, and I did it without hesitation. Practice specific situations you might face in English, like giving directions, ordering food, or introducing yourself. The more you prepare, the easier it will be when the moment comes. One of my teachers, Mr. Anderson, once gave me a piece of advice that I still use today. He said, when you're nervous, slow down. People will understand you better if you speak slowly and clearly rather than quickly and with mistakes. It was such simple advice, but it made a huge difference. I used to rush through my sentences because I was scared people would lose interest if I took too long. But I learned that speaking slowly actually makes you sound more confident. Take your time when you speak. There's no need to rush. Another time, I was having lunch with a group of friends, and one of them, Mike, was talking about his job in marketing. He used so many words I didn't understand, like campaign strategy and branding. I felt lost, but instead of pretending to understand, I asked him what those words meant. Mike was kind enough to explain, and that's when I realized it's okay to ask questions. People are usually happy to explain if you don't understand something. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I also learned to use technology to my advantage. There are so many apps out there for learning English, like Duolingo and Babbel. But one of my favorite ways to practice was using my phone's voice assistant, like Siri or Google Assistant. I'd ask them questions in English, and they'd respond. It was like having a mini conversation partner in my pocket. You can try this too. Ask your phone questions like, what's the weather today? Or how do you say this word? It's a fun way to practice speaking without the pressure of talking to a real person. There was another trick I picked up from Emma, who was always full of good advice. She told me, watch English TV shows or YouTube videos with subtitles. But don't just read the subtitles, try to match the way they speak. So I started watching my favorite shows with the subtitles on, and I'd repeat the lines after the characters, trying to match their tone and speed. This helped me sound more natural when I spoke. Mimic native speakers. Listen to how they talk and try to copy their tone and pronunciation. It's one of the best ways to sound more fluent. One time, I was feeling really down. I had spent weeks practicing, but I still felt like I wasn't improving fast enough. I was crying in my room, feeling like I'd never be as good as Emma or Lisa. My mom came in, saw my tears, and hugged me. She said, Sarah, you're already better than you were yesterday. Progress is slow, but every step forward counts. That day, I realized something important: be kind to yourself. Learning a language is hard, and it takes time. Celebrate the small victories, and don't get discouraged if you don't see progress right away. Finally, I want to share the most important lesson I've learned. Learning English isn't just about speaking fluently or having perfect grammar. It's about connecting with people. It's about sharing your thoughts, your feelings, and your experiences with others. English gave me the confidence to express myself in ways I never could before. It opened doors for me, from making new friends to landing job opportunities. English is more than a language, it's a bridge to new possibilities. So, I want to leave you with this thought: keep going. No matter where you are in your journey, you're doing great. Every word you learn, every conversation you have, brings you closer to your goal. Remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about progress. And now, I want to hear from you. What's your biggest challenge with learning English? Have you found any tips that helped you improve? Let's share our experiences and help each other grow. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and never stop believing in yourself.